after, so I'm going to start the recording. And Joyce Fox Bedford is a romance author, like most of us, and has been riding horses for almost 50 years, as she tells us. And she's going to tell us a lot of things that we need to know to put horses in our romance novels. So I'm very excited about this. And I see from what you have up on the screen here, Joyce, that you're already going to be telling us things that I don't know. So go ahead, let's start.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And I'm so delighted to be here. I'm so happy that Paula invited me. So this is a document I'll be going over very quickly. It's a 4-page document that I put together, and it's going to go over very basic information about horses and riding. As I say in that little first paragraph up there, when myself and other fellow horse people are reading books or watching movies even, or TV shows, we get kind of irritated when the writers get things, really basic things, wrong about horses, because it would just be so easy to look it up. And that tells us right away that we're dealing with someone that doesn't really know what they're talking about. So the author loses credibility with people who are familiar with horses. So at the end of this, or whenever, I will give you a free copy of this document if you message me on my author Facebook page, or this Facebook page that I'm on right now. But I have a J. Fox Bedford author page, so we can also do that. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to go over is what do we call different kinds of horses? A foal is a baby horse. It's like a newborn. A colt, when we refer to a colt, that's a young horse up until about the age of 5 years. And it's usually a male, but technically a young female horse can also be called a colt. A filly.
Can I ask a question right here at the beginning?
Sure.
How long do you call a foal a foal?
I would say maybe just like the first couple of months.
Okay, thank you.
You can check me on that, but it's really just when it's a little baby, and it's scampering around its mother. I would say after, let's put it this way, after about 6 months, the foal is weaned from the mother. It's taken away from the mother, and then it's called a weanling. And then when it's 1 year old, it's referred to as a yearling. So you can use those terms also. A filly is only referred to a female horse, but that's also a young horse, a filly. A stallion, of course, everybody probably knows that. A stallion is a male horse, and it's a horse that can reproduce. It has not been gelded. Most people in modern times do not ride stallions. They can be very hard to control when there's a mare or mares around. But like if you're writing an historical novel, in the Middle Ages, or for example, Paula, I think you do some novels like maybe in the American West, like during the 1800s, that kind of thing.
Early 1800s, yes.
The Native Americans, I mean, they probably never gelded their horses because they wanted their horses to reproduce. So you have to take the time frame into concept there also. A gelding is a male horse that's been castrated. So most of us that ride, if we ride a male horse, it's a gelding. A mare is a female horse. And a broodmare is what we refer to a mare that's used for breeding. Broodmares can also be ridden. A lot of people ride their mares and they breed them also. But a mare that's just strictly used for breeding is called a broodmare. Okay, let me scroll down a little bit here. Colors. So these are the most common colors. And this is one area where people that aren't really familiar with horses can get these wrong. A chestnut is a dark reddish brown. You'll see the word sorrel used a lot. And those two, chestnut and sorrel, are somewhat interchangeable, but a sorrel is technically a really bright coppery color. Black, of course, is black. A gray horse, and there's a lot of confusion with grays and whites. A gray horse is not a white horse. A gray horse has black skin, and it's born in a dark or charcoal color, and it gets lighter, a lighter gray as it gets older. It can also have dapples, like you'll see a dapple gray. Those are kind of like splotchy marks on the horse in a darker color. A gray horse usually has a dark mane and tail, black mane and tail when when they're young, and that gets lighter with age. So if you see a gray horse, or it might even look like a white horse, excuse me, and it has almost a whitish mane and tail, it's probably older.
Now,
A white
is a
yes,
gray
yes.
horse, is that also what you call a flea-bitten horse?
Yes, so gray's a dapple gray or flea gray. A flea gray or a flea-bitten gray is one that has like little tiny flecks all over it, almost like freckles, not spots like an Appaloosa, but like little freckles.
Thank you.
White horses are rare, so think like albino. They're white. Underneath the fur they have pink skin. Sometimes and very frequently they'll have blue eyes. A palomino, of course, think of Roy Rogers, a golden horse with a white mane and tail. Sometimes that white is called flaxen mane and tail. A bay is a dark brown horse. It could vary from different shades of brown, but it's basically a brown horse that has a black mane and tail, and it has black points on the legs, meaning the legs look like they were dipped in black. Just like if you had a Siamese cat, I guess, and they say black points. So that's what a bay is. Let me scroll down here. A buckskin is a lighter brown horse that has the black points also, and the black mane and tail. Now, any of those horses can also have markings on their face, and I'll get into that in the next section here. And by the way, just like Paula's doing, just feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Spotted horses, there's a breed called Appaloosa. I think a lot of people are probably familiar with that. It was developed by the Nez Perce Native American tribe in the Pacific Northwest. You might have heard of, I think, Chief Joseph was his name. And that's a really popular breed. Some of them are like a dark color, and they have what's called a blanket across their rump that's spotted. Some of them are just spotted all over. Paint or pinto. There are color registry breeds for both paints and pintos, so that gets a little complicated. But basically, a paint horse is either a dark horse with white overlay or a white horse with dark overlay. And you could say spots or splashes. And I'm trying to think of if you ever used to watch Bonanza, Little Joe rode a paint horse. They're pretty popular. A lot of people like them because they're kind of splashy looking. Okay, so the markings on a horse, and most of these are on the face. A star, of course, is a white area in the middle of the forehead, and it can be any shape. It's not usually the shape of a star. I've seen some really cute pictures of horses with a star that's shaped like a heart, but it's usually just a mark, a round mark. A stripe is a white strip down the front of the face. A snip would be a white marking on the horse's nostril, on either nostril or both. A blaze is a wide white marking down the front of the face. So a horse could have a star, a stripe, a snip, and a blaze all in one face. A bald face is...
I was just going to ask you if there was a difference between the width or the location of these things when you said they could have all of them, and that really surprises me.
Right, because think like the star would be in the middle of the forehead, a stripe could extend down from the star, and then a snip is on the nostril. Well, they couldn't have a stripe and a blaze because the blaze is basically a wider stripe.
Okay.
A bald face is a white face, and you'll usually see those only on paint horses. The eyes can be blue. Sometimes one eye is brown and one eye is blue if the face is really white. Usually the muzzle, like the nose area, is very pink and sunburned looking. And if you own a horse with that coloring, you'll find yourself buying a lot of sunblock. Because they do get sunburned, and we put sunblock on them. A stocking is a white leg marking that goes up to the bottom of the knee in the front, or the hock, that's the big joint in the back. But there are all different lengths of, there are a lot of different lengths of these white markings on legs, but basically a stocking or a sock. A sock is a white leg marking, but it doesn't go up as high as a stocking. Okay, mannerisms. And this is where a lot of people get confused too. Lots of times, even on TV shows or movies, like you'll hear horses neighing, and or like people, it shows people riding them, and you hear horses neighing. Horses usually don't whinny or neigh unless they're out in a field somewhere and they're calling to other horses. They don't neigh while you're riding them, unless they would maybe see a loose horse that was from their herd or something like that. But they're usually pretty quiet. They don't whinny or neigh just for no reason. A bad mannerism is striking. If they strike out with a front hoof, they can really hurt you if they do that. And they do that when they're fighting. Like if they see a snake, they might strike out with a front hoof and try to stomp it. When they kick, it's with one or both back legs, and they can kick out to the side pretty quickly and get you if it's a horse that has a bad mannerism like kicking, or they can lift up both back legs and just kick straight out. That's kind of how they kick each other most of the time. Bucking, this happens when, well, it can be when you're riding, or also just when they're out there running around and playing. When they buck, they basically come off the ground with all 4 feet and their head is down. So you'll see that if you watch rodeo at all. When a horse rears, it rises up on its back legs. So its front legs are off the ground. It's almost like it's standing on its back legs. And if you're ever on a horse that rears, do not pull back, lean forward, and lean on the neck so it will go back down, because you could pull the horse back over on you. And that could be something you could put in your book. If someone is on a horse and it rears up and they're inexperienced, or they panic and they pull back, the horse can literally fall over backward on them. Yes.
The difference between striking and rearing, does that have to do with how high they go, or
no, striking is, maybe I didn't make it clear, but striking is really like with 1 foot at a time, whereas rearing, they're coming up with both legs, off both legs in the front. And they don't have to rear the whole way up. Sometimes they'll just rear up a little bit and you can get them to go back down, and they can rear while you're leading them. So like if you're beside them or in front of them, they want to resist you, they can rear up. So it can be very dangerous. If you even get nicked with a horse's hoof, whether it has a shoe on or not, especially if it has a shoe on, you can really get hurt. So just be very careful around horses' legs and feet. Shying or spooking, it usually means they dart sideways. And if you're riding a horse and it shies or spooks at something, it's real easy to come off, because they can go sideways really quick. So bolting is when a horse breaks into a run unexpectedly. So like in your book, if someone is riding and they're maybe not paying attention, they're looking around and daydreaming or something, and then all of a sudden, whoosh, the horse goes from like 0 to 50 in like 1 second. That's a bolt. And when that happens, the rider would go off backwards, because the horse just literally runs out from underneath you. Okay. I was just trying to think of all the different things that horses do.
Oh, this is great information. And I can see where someone who's not familiar with horses could get this completely wrong.
Right. Yes. So horses have gaits, and the basic gaits are the walk, the trot, a canter or lope, and a gallop. So a walk is 4 beat. They put 1 foot down at a time. A trot, they pick up the pace and they're putting 2 feet down at the same time, and it's a diagonal. So it would be like the left front and the back right. And when you're riding a horse and it's trotting, that's usually when it's the bounciest for people that don't have a lot of riding experience. So you might see people do what we call posting, which is they rise and sit back down with the rhythm of the trot. And that's for English and Western riders, both do that. It just helps you, you're not bouncing around so much when you do that.
I understand that. I rode horses very infrequently when I was a teenager. And I remember I had this one horse that's all it wanted to do was trot, no matter what I wanted. And I got a bruised backside from it.
Oh, yeah. 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 If you're not, if you don't ride all the time and you go on a vacation and let's go horseback riding, you can come home pretty sore from bouncing on the saddle. So my advice is if you do that, try to keep your butt out of the saddle. Like it's almost like riding a bicycle. When your bike goes over bumps and you kind of get up out of the seat and the bike is bouncing around underneath you, that's what you would want to do on a horse to save yourself from all the bouncing. So a canter or a lope is a 3 beat. It's like da-da-da, 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 okay? A gallop is a 4 beat. So when the horse is galloping, and think Kentucky Derby, when the horses are on a racetrack, that's the fastest speed they go. And at intervals during the gallop, they are completely off the ground. So it's different than the canter or lope where there's always 1 foot on the ground.
So, realistically, how long can a person gallop a horse without killing it or totally wiping it out, you know?
Well, that depends a lot on how fit the horse is. When you see the races like the Derby and all those the thoroughbred racehorse races, I think those races are maybe just like right around a mile. When they race quarter horses, a quarter horse was bred to go as fast as possible in a quarter of a mile. So when you see a quarter horse race, it's over before you can even blink because they're racing for only a quarter of a mile. I've read about people that have adopted a Mustang. There are ways to the Bureau of Land Management has Mustang adoptions. So those are wild horses that grew up out there on the range. They're wild. I've read about people who've ridden Mustangs and they can just like gallop forever because, out there in the wild, if they're running from something, the horse's basic security is to run. They run away from danger. That's the first thing they do. So, but how fast you could, if you could canter or gallop for a couple of miles, maybe on a really fit horse, but it would start to wear out, and then it would drop. I mean, it would, it could just like a person.
Yeah. So
Trotting,
you
probably
mentioned
trot for hours.
you
I'm sorry.
mentioned a Mustang. Is that the term for a wild horse?
Yeah, the American Mustang, I didn't list that in the breeds, but that's basically what the wild horses are out west. They're called Mustangs, and there are adoptions. You could Google it if you were interested. I think a lot of people that adopt Mustangs don't realize what they're getting into. And I actually wrote a short story about that, and it's getting ready to be published in a literary magazine. I'll have it on my Facebook page as soon as it does, but it's based on two friends of mine, two elderly women that adopted two mares from two wild Mustang mares. So anyway, then the other, so those gaits, those first 4 gaits there, those are common with all horses, but some horses are called gaited horses, like Tennessee Walkers, Morgans, Saddlebreds, and those horses have another gait called a rack, where they do a lateral trot. So instead of their legs moving diagonally at the trot, they're moving laterally, and they also have races for horses like that. When you see those harness races, those are gaited horses that are in those races.
So you're bilateral, you mean like the left front and back move and then the
Yeah.
right front and back move? Oh, that seems very awkward.
Yes, yeah. But those horses, gaited horses, a lot of people consider them the most comfortable to ride. And they are, I mean, we've had saddlebreds, Tennessee Walkers. They are very comfortable to ride when they trot normally. I've never sat a racking trot. That would be really fast. I think it would be hard to sit, but. So next we go into the most common breeds. There are probably thousands of breeds around the globe. This is basically here for America. These are the most common breeds that you'll encounter in your daily life. Here, I live in Texas. So Texas has the largest population of the American quarter horse. And lots of times you'll see it abbreviated like that, AQHA, American Quarter Horse Association, or really just referred to as a quarter horse. So when you watch Yellowstone, or you see cowboys riding, or you see rodeo, most of those horses are quarter horses. A thoroughbred does not mean a horse that has a pedigree. A lot of people make that mistake. They think a horse that's registered is a thoroughbred. That's not correct. A thoroughbred is a specific breed. All of the racehorses that you see, like for example in the Derby, those are all registered thoroughbreds. The thoroughbred is an old breed, and I think it was founded with a combination of Arabians. Oh, sorry, I can't remember the other two. But and I think I'm trying to think if it's an American breed or a British breed, but anyway, here's the
What do you mean by dressage? I don't know what dressage.
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 If you ever watch the Olympics, the equestrian Olympics, they compete in several different areas of riding. Dressage is one of them. It's where a rider comes into an arena, stops in the middle, salutes the judge, and then goes through a pattern. They'll have like letters along the edges of the arena, and the rider will maybe start trotting at a certain letter and go in a circle, maybe go around, pick up a canter at another letter. And then there are different types of trotting and cantering that are done in dressage. That you can do an extended trot, collected trot, extended canter, collected canter, change leads at the canter. There's all different. So it's like considered what they call like high schooling. Like for example, when you see the Lipizans or the Spanish riding school, those are the foundations for dressage, if you've ever seen movies about that.
Okay, thank you.
So we already talked about Mustang. Talked about Appaloosa a little bit. So draft horses. A draft horse, I guess that term comes from the fact that those horses were and probably still are used to pull wagons. Think the Budweiser hitch. Those are Clydesdales. I think everybody's probably seen those on beer commercials, and they do travel from city to city. If you ever get a chance if the Clydesdale hitch comes to your town, go and see them because they're really impressive.
It's amazing. Those horses, I'm 5'10", and my head did not come to the top of their backs.
Right.
It's just
they're very big. They're very big. Yeah. They're huge.
And I suppose that's what makes them strong enough to be able to pull heavy loads.
Right. Yeah, they're very strong. And the draft horses, all the breeds of draft horses, sometimes you'll hear them referred to as gentle giants. Um, I mean, they can be not so gentle also, but they're considered cold-blooded horses. They don't fly off the handle usually that easily like a thoroughbred or an Arabian might, which are considered hot horses. So some of the draft horse breeds, Clydesdale, which we just mentioned, Belgian, the Belgians are kind of like a Palomino color with the flaxen mane and tail. Percherons come from France. They're considered the breed of blacks and grays. And I didn't put Frisian in there, but I'm not sure if the Frisians are considered draft horses, but a Percheron looks more like a bulkier type of Frisian. And I think most of us have probably seen Frisians now because they're very popular, especially in movies about medieval times and that sort of thing. They have long flowing black manes. Shires kind of look like Clydesdales. And an interesting thing about Shires is that breed was developed and expanded on by King Henry VIII, that he was kind of fond of that breed. And all of these draft horse breeds come from the great war horses that the knights rode during the Middle Ages. And those horses were huge. So when you read about someone like Joan of Arc, she was a 15-year-old girl. She was riding a war horse, which would be, like you said, Paula, like the size of a Clydesdale. And she was wearing armor. So she's one of my heroes. Oh, I guess I did mention Frisian there. Yeah. So ponies, a lot of people that aren't horse people think that ponies are just baby horses or small horse, or well, they are small, but they're not baby horses. Ponies are a separate breed. They only get to a certain height. And I talk about height here, right below here, so we'll go into that a little further. But some of the common breeds, Welsh ponies, those are the ones that you'll see a lot of little kids riding in horse shows. Shetland, they almost look like minis. They're like the little roly-poly shaggy ponies. Connemara, that's a more elegant pony, but you do see a lot of those in horse shows. The Chincoteagues, everybody's probably heard of Misty of Chincoteague. That's an island on the eastern shore, I think off the coast of Maryland and the Chesapeake Bay area. But those are ponies. So all you really need to know if you're riding is a pony is not a baby horse. And then there are the minis, and people they breed horses down to these little miniature sizes, just like I guess over the years, over the ages, people have bred dogs to be smaller and smaller, like teacup poodles and little tiny dogs. Even I think miniature pinchers, min pins. So mini horses are horses that people have bred down to be really small, and they're super cute. I'll say that I see a lot of videos on Facebook and Pinterest, and they're
So
adorable.
10 hands, that's about 40 inches, is that right?
Yeah, because a hand is 4 inches. So
Okay, so
that's
what on earth does a person want with a mini horse? I mean, we're talking about a little tiny thing.
I know, yeah, just people have them like as pets, really. I've even seen people have them come in their house, and I also have seen people use small ponies and minis as therapy horses. They take them to nursing homes and that sort of thing. How they keep them from not pooping in the middle of the floor, I don't know, but but it's very therapeutic to be around any size horse. Horses are very quiet. They love to be petted, most horses. And it's just very calming to just be around horses. So I think as a therapy animal, that's probably very common to use a mini. So talking
That's
about
amazing.
the height of horses, it's measured in hands.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if you can see like my hand on the screen, but
Yeah.
it's the widest part of your hand. So back in the day, I guess when they didn't have measuring tape and that sort of thing, at these horse sales, you know, at the county fair, people would just literally put one hand on top of another from the ground up, starting where the front hoof is resting on the ground, the whole way up to the withers, which is that bump at the end of the horse's neck. So ponies are, like I say here, 10 to 14.3 hands. Anything larger than 14.3 is not technically a pony. A horse, horses go in size from 15 to 18 hands, and maybe even bigger for those, like those Budweiser horses that you saw, Paula.
Oh.
Typical riding horse is about 15 to 16 hands. Thoroughbreds can get taller. They're usually 16.1, 16.3. The horses that you see people show jumping, a lot of those horses are 16 hands or higher.
Okay.
Okay. How are we doing on time?
We have about another 20 minutes
Okay, good. Okay.
if you need that long.
We'll probably be done before then.
Okay.
Okay, so tack is what we refer to as the equipment that we put on the horse for riding, or I should have said also for driving, which would be hitching them up to a wagon. But you know, when we say I'm going to tack up my horse, that means I'm going to put the saddle and bridle on.
Okay.
So the saddle, of course, that's the thing that you sit in, goes on the horse's back. And the two most common saddle types are English or Western. Also, Australian saddles are fairly popular. The Western saddle is what you see in all the, you know, the cowboys are riding, all the guys on Yellowstone. It has the horn in the front, has the flaps where, you know, where your legs go into the stirrups. An English saddle is just it doesn't have as much to it. It doesn't have a horn. The stirrups are on kind of skinny leathers. The stirrups are usually made of iron. So, and you've probably seen the people that are doing the show jumping and that type of thing, they're riding English saddles. The cowboys, like I said, are Western saddles. Barrel racers, those people are riding in Western saddles. And there are all types of English and Western saddles. Like there are saddles for roping, there are saddles for barrel racing. There are English saddles for the racing saddles, but those are the main common styles. The bridle is what goes on the horse's head, and it's made up of several different pieces, a headpiece, a bit, and reins. That whole thing is usually called a bridle. I didn't put in here halter, but halter is not really considered part of the tack. But if you were just to go out and get your horse out of the field and lead it in to tack it up, you would probably walk out there with a halter and a lead line. I don't think I mentioned that here, but the bridle is what you put on when it's time to ride. And I guess that's one thing that I see mistakes sometimes in books, where people will they are leading their horse around by the bridle. You would do that, I guess, if you were out riding and you dismounted and maybe you wanted to just stand there and chat with someone or walk around a little bit. But horses are usually, you would just clip a lead line to the bit and walk it around that way. Oh, and you would never tie a horse up with the reins. The cowboys will they have long reins that are really just two separate pieces. They might throw those over a hitching post, but you would never tie a horse's reins, because if they pull back, a horse can break leather very quickly. So that would be a good way to have the horse
So
break away.
you said something that I don't understand. Okay, I see that I always thought the bit was part of the bridle, but you just said that, you would lead a horse by just hitching up to to the bit. Well, how do you get the bit in there if you don't have all the other headgear?
Well, I'm sorry, I was confusing. I guess what I meant is, let's say you went out on a ride and you decided that you wanted to have a little picnic or something. So you dismounted and instead of leading the horse around with the reins, you had a lead line with you. Maybe you had it curled up and it has a clip at the end. So you have it clipped to your saddle. So the best thing to do would be to take the whole bridle off, put the halter on the horse and clip up a lead line. But if you didn't want to do that, you could clip a lead line to the bit. And the bit is a metal piece. And I talk about that next. There are thousands of different kinds of bits, but they're usually made out of smooth metal. Some of them are rubber. A lot of them have what's called a joint in the middle. That's a snaffle bit. Those are the mildest kind of bits. You'll see Western riders, their bit has a long shank to it and the reins are attached to that. Bits work all kinds of different ways in the horse's mouth. So if you are writing about, someone using a harsh bit on a horse, I would suggest that you Google that and look up, different kinds of bits so that you are writing about it correctly. We could talk about bits for, hours. There's so many different kinds, and I'm not an expert on bits, but
Okay.
But they are attached to the bridle. And when you ride horses, the bit is what controls the horse. It's in their mouth. It's not sitting on their teeth. Let me see if I talk about this a little bit later. Yeah, no. So there's a part in the horse's mouth called the bar, where they have teeth in the front, and then they have a gap, and then they have molars in the back. The bar is a part of the horse's mouth where there aren't any teeth, and that's where the bit rests. So it's hitting their teeth when you pull back on it, but it's resting on just gums in their mouth.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about horses. How convenient.
Right, yeah. Anyway, okay, so let's see next. Reins. I've seen reins, lots of times I see reins spelled like R-E-I-G-N-S, and that just cracks me up. It's R-E-I-N-S. And they are long leather or braided nylon strips. They are attached to the bit, and you hold them in your hands. As I mentioned earlier, Western reins can be what they call split reins, which really means there's like two separate pieces of leather, one in each hand. The rider usually holds them, in the middle by the saddle horn. Or they can sometimes riders will tie those split reins together in a knot to make it easier to hold. English reins usually have a little buckle at the end where your hand is, and that's what I'm more familiar with. And there are all kinds of reins made out of cotton, nylon, braided, non-braided. There's a million different kinds, but basically that is what you are using to control the horse because they're attached to the bit. Just so you know, there are people who ride without bits. There are some kind of bridles that put pressure on different parts of the horse's head and nose so that you can control them without a bit in their mouth. Just so you know that, so you know about that. Stirrups are where you put your feet, and when you mount a horse, I talk about that a little bit later, so I guess I'll go into that later, but that's where your feet go. In English, they're called stirrup irons. Western stirrups are usually thick leather. They're padded, kind of big. Spurs, whether the rider is riding English or Western, it's up to the rider's discretion if they want to use spurs. You'll see Western spurs that have like a wheel and little jagged edges and that kind of thing. And you'll see people that, I guess, like the Bronco riders, that they want the horses to buck. You'll see them wearing spurs. A lot of people ride in spurs. They're not cruel if they're used properly. A lot of people just use them to nudge the horse. Like if your horse is a little bit lazy, that gives your foot a little more oomph when you apply it to the side of the horse. So, and English spurs are usually just, they go around the bottom of the boot, and there's just a little metal nub that sticks out, but the horse feels that when you push it into their side.
So I have read books where they talk about, and I can't imagine anybody who would want to do this with a horse that they own, because I mean, horses are valuable, and they were important pieces of equipment, if you will. That they were raking their horse with their spurs until their flanks were bleeding. Is that realistic?
I mean, people have done that, there are cruel people out there, but yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's a valuable animal, so why would you want to do that? And most horses don't need that kind of, impulsion to move on. So, but I think you might see that, where it's a very dramatic piece and they're trying to get you to feel bad or something, but most people wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Well, I can't
anymore.
imagine anybody doing that to their own animal.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to be able to use the animal. If you incapacitate them, you can't use the animal.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to want to put big gouge marks in the side of your horse, because then you'll have to put salve on there, and so they won't get an infection and all that. So
Yeah.
So as far as riding is concerned, whether you ride English or Western or whatever, horses are always mounted from the left side, unless you are out somewhere, like say you're out on a trail ride, you get to a really tight area, like you're on the side of a hill, there would be exceptions. And it's always good to train your horse to allow you to mount from the right side. But just generally speaking, 99.9% of the time, you are going to mount from the left side. And if you watch movies and things, you'll see they're mounting from the left side. To mount, you put your left foot in a stirrup, gather up the reins, or you can gather the reins and then put your foot in the stirrup. And most people would grab on to some part of the saddle. If it's a Western saddle, they grab onto the horn. On an English saddle, you can just put your hand there in the front, and also maybe the back of the saddle, and just kind of bounce maybe once and swing up. For dismounting, the Western rider typically, what did I say here? The Western rider throws their right leg around the back of the horse. Yeah, and steps out of the stirrup. Yes. So they come to a halt, they pull back on the reins, and then the right leg, the rider's right leg goes around the back of the horse. The left leg stays in the stirrup, and then they step out of it. An English rider would typically take both feet out of the stirrups and just kind of lean forward and just swing off and land on the ground with your both feet. To ask the horse to, when you get on a horse and you're asking it to move, you just simply squeeze with your legs. If it doesn't move, you can give a little kick with your heel, or the stronger you apply your heels into the horse's side, the more it's telling the horse to move on. Some horses, you just have to basically think, move ahead, and it will move. Yeah, as I say, most horses respond to a gentle squeeze. And yeah, when I watch Westerns, I mean, and I guess they do this to be dramatic, but they'll come galloping in and they yank back on the reins, the horses' heads fly up in the air, and you don't need to ride a horse like that. But I guess in a lot of movies they're doing that just for drama. And you could put that kind of drama in your book or your story. So I say here how you should stop a horse. You just slow your own seat movement, your butt. You just slow that down. And if you lean back, that tells the horse to slow down and stop. And you apply some pressure on the reins as well. I think that's it. Let me see here. Yep, that is about it. Any questions on?
Oh, I've been asking them as I go along, and as I said, a lot of people catch these on the replay. You
Right.
have been very thorough with all this information, and I think it would be extremely helpful for people to know this so that when they're writing, they get it right.
Mhm.
I know I used to shoot black powder guns, you know,
Mhm.
the early 1800 guns, and it just, you know, it just, I can always tell, like, it's so easy to find out how to load a gun or anything like that. Just look it up. And I can always tell when somebody says, oh, I don't know how to do it, and we'll just write it this way. And I can imagine that if you know horses and the way that you do, Joyce, that's very easy to spot when somebody hasn't done even the barest of research
Oh,
as
yeah. Yeah.
they're writing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, and just like with you with guns and with you know, old weaponry, the writer loses credibility with the reader. You know, it makes you think like they didn't even bother to look this up if they're going to be that, you know, casual about it. And so therefore, you know, you kind of lose interest in reading that story if it's inaccurate. Yeah, guns and weaponry, I mean, I know nothing about that. So anytime I put any kind of a gun or something like that in my story, I try to go and look up as much as I can. But or anything. I think you featured someone on scuba diving last month. And
Yes.
that, I mean, there would be so much to learn about that and so much to get wrong. So
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thank you very much, Joyce,
thank
for
you.
bringing us all this valuable information. I do appreciate it. And what, again, is your author page, J. Fox Bedford on
Author.
Facebook?
Yes, J.
Oh,
Fox
J. Fox
Bedford,
Bedford
author.
author.
Yeah.
Okay, on
But
Facebook.
even, I mean, whether they go to that or my page that I'm hooked up with romance writers or dream weavers, either way, just message me and I'll be happy to send you this document.
Okay, well, I'm telling you right now, I want this document.
Oh. Okay, you got it.
So I'm going to stop the recording. Then I have something that I want to tell you that is totally nothing to do with this at all.
Okay.
But thank you for coming tonight.